America is more divided than ever. Is this the end of our unity or the beginning of a new America? How did we get here? And where do we go from here? Stay tuned. Welcome back to American Patriot Hub, where we bring you the truth straight from the bunker. Today, we're diving deep into the growing division in America, socially, politically, and economically. This isn't just about red versus blue or rich versus poor. This is about the very fabric of our nation being pulled apart. And joining me today to help us navigate this complex topic is Gulsi Tabbard, a veteran and national security analyst who's seen firsthand the consequences of division, both at home and abroad. Welcome, Gulsi.
Thanks for having me, Betty. This is a critical issue we're facing, and the stakes couldn't be higher. We're not just talking about political disagreements, we're talking about the core values that define America being put to the test.
Let's take a moment to step back and look at how we got here. The country is facing a wave of political polarization, fueled by social media echo chambers, economic inequality, and cultural divides. In the last decade, we've seen tensions rise to levels we haven't seen since the civil rights era.
That's right, Betty. These divisions didn't appear overnight. It's a combination of rapid technological changes, increasing economic disparities, and a political system that rewards conflict over compromise. The question now is, can we find a way to bridge these divides?
Great question, Gulsi. Let's break this down into the key factors driving this division. First up, political polarization. It's no secret that Democrats and Republicans are more divided than ever. We're living in an era where compromise is seen as weakness, and that's paralyzing our government.
Absolutely, Betty. The two-party system has always had disagreements, but what we're seeing now is an ideological rift that's preventing real governance. Instead of focusing on the American people, politicians are focusing on party loyalty and scoring points in the media.
Next, let's talk about the role of social media. Platforms like Facebook and Twitter X were supposed to bring us together, but instead, they've created echo chambers where we only hear what we already believe. This is fueling misinformation and radicalization.
Social media algorithms are designed to keep us engaged, and they do that by showing us content that enrages or confirms our biases. It's driving people further apart, and it's making it harder for us to find common ground.
Finally, let's not forget about economic disparities. The wealth gap is widening, and people are feeling left behind. This frustration is feeding into the political and social divide. People don't just feel divided politically, they feel economically isolated.
And that's where the danger lies. When people are struggling to make ends meet, they lose faith in the system. They stop believing that government or anyone has their best interests at heart.
Thank you, Gulsi. Now let's look at some of the evidence. A recent study from Pew Research found that 78% of Americans feel the country is more divided than ever before. That's not just a feeling, it's reality. We've seen protests, civil unrest, and even violence in recent years, much of it driven by this sense of division.
Historically, when a country becomes this divided, it's a warning sign. Look at the fall of empires or even the lead up to major conflicts. Division creates weakness, and if we're not careful, it could lead to a much larger crisis down the road.
Just look at the protests last summer. People on both sides took to the streets, some for justice, others for freedom. But instead of listening to each other, we're digging in our heels, and that's dangerous. Now, some might say that division is inevitable in a diverse country like ours. Others argue that the real cause is misinformation spread by certain media outlets. What do you think about that, Gulsi?
There's some truth to that. Misinformation is a huge problem, and differing values will always create some level of division. But we can't ignore the larger systemic issues like income inequality, the failure of our political system to adapt, and how technology is manipulating our interactions. These aren't just differences, these are engineered divisions.
So, where does that leave us? Division might feel like the new normal, but it doesn't have to be. We need to rebuild trust in each other, trust in our institutions, and trust in our ability to move forward as a united country.
Unity doesn't mean we all have to agree, but it does mean we need to start listening again. If we don't, the consequences could be dire for our nation.
Now it's your turn. What do you think is the biggest factor causing division in America? Is it politics, social media, or something else? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to American Patriot Hub so you never miss an episode. Until next time. Welcome back to American Patriot Hub, the only place where we keep it real and cut through the noise. I'm your host, Bunker Betty. And we've got a packed show today with everything you need to know, from domestic politics to international events shaking up the world. And joining me is our very special guest anchor, Gulsi Tabbard. Gulsi is a veteran and national security analyst who knows what it takes to keep America safe. Welcome back, Gulsi.
Thanks for having me, Betty. There's a lot going on, both here in the US and abroad, that Americans need to pay attention to. Let's get to it.
Let's shift gears for a second and take a look back in history. On this day, October 11th, in 1968, NASA launched Apollo 7, the first manned mission of the Apollo program. It was a huge step toward the moon landing that followed the next year.
That was a turning point for America's global leadership, Betty. Space exploration isn't just about rockets and satellites, it's about advancing technology and innovation, which still influences our military and civilian industries today.
Exactly, Gulsi. It reminds me of how critical it is to invest in innovation today, whether it's in tech, energy, or even national defense. We need to stay ahead, not fall behind. Now let's talk about something that's hitting headlines around the globe, the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. The violence has flared up again, and it's drawing in the attention of nations worldwide, including the US. Should America be getting involved more, or should we be stepping back?
This conflict is incredibly complex, and while Israel is one of our strongest allies, America needs to approach this with caution. We can't afford to jump into another foreign conflict without considering the long term impacts, both politically and financially. Diplomacy should always be the first option, but we also need to support our allies when they're threatened.
I hear you, Gulsi. I just worry about how this might spill over into a larger regional conflict. What happens in the Middle East always has ripple effects on oil prices and military spending here at home.
You're right to be concerned, but that's why we need careful, measured responses. There's already enough instability in the world right now. Throwing fuel on the fire won't help anyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We've got to think about the long game here. What do you folks think? Should we do more to back Israel or focus on our own problems first? Let us know in the comments. Well, that's it for today's show, folks. From the chaos in Washington to the tensions overseas, there's never a dull moment. But the one thing you can count on is that American Patriot Hub will keep bringing you the truth, no matter what.
Thanks again for having me, Betty. Now, more than ever, it's important for Americans to stay informed and engaged. The decisions we make today will shape the future for generations to come.
Couldn't agree more, Gulsi. And for all of you watching, make sure to subscribe, comment, and let us know your thoughts on today's topics. See you next time, right here in the bunker.